Welcome to Game On, a presentation about ethical hacking. I'm Monica Poole.
Jaime LaRue.
And we're here to tell you how to hack ethically, maybe.
So the first thing is you all received a card when you walked into the room. The task on the card is yours to be done in this session, if at all possible. And when you're able to accomplish it, we would appreciate it if you had Twitter, to use a Twitter account and tweet your success using hashtag ethical hacking. So when we developed this course ran last fall for the first time. Monica and I paired up fairly naturally because we both teach in a style of teaching that is more similar to PBL or project-based or problem-based pedagogy. And we recognized that in this course we wanted to employ that style as well. We wanted it to be as hands-on as possible, as project-based and problem-based, and develop critical thinking skills in our students. So that was sort of the thinking part. The doing part was we also wanted students to be engaged in activities, not just hands-on virtual environment activities, which they did, but also activities that focused on the ethics piece, that really did it justice. This course is a 4-credit course with entire credit devoted to ethics with an embedded ethics instructor. And that was intentional and purposeful because we wanted the students to develop the skills to determine what does it mean to be ethical in their hacking.
One of the things that we did was we taught the students social engineering. The first kind of hacking that you can learn doesn't require a computer at all. And I want to show you this clip by Kevin Mitnick, who's sort of a guru of social engineering. This
was, I don't know, about 15 years ago. No, about 20 years ago. It was a Hollywood...
Okay. So technical difficulty.
I'm not the computer professor.
Just leave it that way.
So you're the social networker.
In a manner of speaking.
And a friend of mine, a guy named Stephen Rhodes at the time, was also a phone freaker, and we decided we wanted to take a self-guided tour of the central office. So it was around 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and we had door codes to all the different offices in Los Angeles, and we just let ourselves in, and we're roaming around the Hollywood CO, and we're about on the 3rd floor, and then all of a sudden, this big guy, security guard, approaches us and goes, "Excuse me, yeah, do you have any ID?" And I go, "Sure, one moment." And I go in my pocket and I said, "Oh, I must have left my ID in the car. I'll go get it, I'll be right back." He goes, "No." He goes, "Who is this guy?" And I go, "Well, he's just a friend of mine, and I want to take him on a tour. He's never seen the central office." He goes, "At 2:30 in the morning?" I said, "Yeah, we just got out of a movie, and my friend has always wanted to work for the phone company. And so I figured I'd just take him on a quick tour." And he goes, "Well, where do you work?" I said, "Well, I work in the Cosmos Center in San Diego." He goes, "Who's your supervisor?" And I told him the name of the supervisor. Incidentally, it was the correct name of the person in the San Diego Cosmos Center. He goes, "No, you guys have to come with us." So he escorts us to the elevator, and I know on the 9th floor is the switching control center, and that's where there's people up there because that office is manned. So you end up getting escorted up to the 9th floor, and there's about 5 or 6 people around, and the security guard's telling them the story. "I found these 2 guys roaming around our building. This guy doesn't have ID. Let's find out what's going on." So one of the other supervisors, not a security guard, he goes, "What's your supervisor's name?" And I gave it to him. I said, "Well, listen, we can't wake her up. Because look, it's 2:30 in the morning. If you want, I'll go to my car, we'll go get my ID, and I'll be right back." Of course, I have no plans of coming back. So he says, "No, we're calling your supervisor." So he picks up a book, some sort of intercompany directory. I'm thinking, well, they don't list home telephone numbers in there. But apparently he had found some sort of notes or whatever listing the supervisor's home phone number. So he calls the supervisor, 2:30 in the morning, Saturday. He goes, "Listen, I found one of your employees, Steve, roaming around one of our offices. And he says he works for you." "Uh-huh. Oh, you want to talk to him?" "Sure." So he hands me the phone, and I go, "Hey, Sally, how are you? I'm really sorry that you were woken up. And I normally would never take a friend on a tour of a central office, And as I'm speaking, she's saying, who are you? Who are you? And I go, yeah, and by the way, Tuesday, we still have that meeting for that report, correct? And she goes, who are you? Who are you? But I'm pressing the phone in my ear, so the other people in the room can't hear what she's saying. He's only listening to my side of the conversation. And I'm like having a calm conversation with her, and I said, listen, okay, I'm just going to take my friend around for about 15 more minutes and we'll leave, and I'll see you on Tuesday. And I went over and I walked it was like about 2 steps, and I hung up the phone. And I go, are you satisfied?
You want to go back to the slides?
Yep.
So we recognized how important social engineering was to being able to become a good hacker, so to speak. And so we made a game that the students would play. Throughout the semester, it was worth about 20% of their grade. We made it a hackerish type game. And here are the rules. And this may look familiar to you since you received some cards on your way in. These cards are very similar to what our students received each class. They were to share the details of their social engineering hack if they successfully completed it on a blog website that we used for the course. The classmates were allowed to mock each other and also reward each other with higher point values for a good hack, or mock each other with low point values for a weak hack. Ultimately, we decided what the point value was for each hack. They also were allowed to take sidekicks on their particular missions. And the hacks, or the social engineering cues, were good for 1 week. And they were allowed to take on sidekicks for their missions, and the sidekicks could be rewarded for their activity and their work. But the sidekicks could also turn against them and receive points if they caused their fellow classmates' mission to fail. Also, students could block hacks, so they learned defense in this as well. And if they were able to block a social engineering attempt, they were awarded points as well. And this ran throughout the semester and amounted to the students, about 20% of the students' grade at the end of the semester.
Now, why did we do this, right? We did this because games work. Jane McGonigal has said, a game is an opportunity to focus our energy with relentless optimism at something we're good at or getting better at and enjoy. In other words, gameplay is the direct emotional opposite of depression. As Jaime said earlier, we are both experienced in project-based and problem-based learning in our other classes, in introductory computer classes, and introductory philosophy classes, and introductory history classes, and introductory experiences in the arts. But the thing is, ethical hacking was an advanced course, and we had to ramp it up a little bit. Project-based learning and problem-based learning engages students on a whole nother level, as many of you know. It gets students to confront hard stuff and find it engaging and make that learning matter. But this course was harder, so we had to resort to a game.
Also, Jane McGonigal I had read over the summer prior to this course her book called Reality is Broken, about how gaming actually makes us happy. Tasks that are a little bit hard, we actually find enjoyable. These are things that we actually prefer to vacation, believe it or not, and studies have proven this. And because this was a hacking class, and hacking in a lot of ways has sort of a gaming mentality, we felt that this was a good approach to dealing with some of the content of the course. If we could make it fun and engaging and feel like a hacker enterprise type thing, that students would likely do it, and do it gladly. Here's a little sample of Jane McGonigal if you're not familiar with her.
I am.
This is from her TED Talk.
This picture pretty much sums up why I think games are so essential to the future survival of the human species. Truly. This is a portrait by a photographer named Phil Toldano. He wanted to capture the emotion of gaming, so he set up a camera in front of gamers while they were playing. And this is a classic gaming emotion. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance in this photo. You probably see the sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration, deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. If you are a gamer, you will notice a few nuances here. The crinkle of the eyes up and around the mouth is a sign of optimism. And the eyebrows up is surprise. This is a gamer who's on the verge of something called an epic win. Now, oh, you've heard of that. Okay, good. So we have some gamers among us. So an epic win is an outcome that is so extraordinarily positive, you had no idea it was even possible until you achieved it. It was almost beyond the threshold of imagination. And when you get there, you are shocked to discover what you're truly capable of. That's an epic win. This is a gamer on the verge of an epic win. And this is the face that we need to see on millions of problem solvers all over the world as we try to tackle the obstacles of the next century. The face of someone who, against all odds, is on the verge of an epic win. Now, unfortunately, this is more of the face that we see in everyday life now as we try to tackle urgent problems. This is what I call the I'm not good at life face. And this is actually me making it. Can you see it? Yes, good. This is actually me making the I'm not good at life face. This is a piece of graffiti in my old neighborhood in Berkeley, California, where I did my PhD on why we're better in games than we are in real life. And this is a problem that a lot of gamers have. We feel that we are not as good in reality as we are in games. And I don't mean just good as in successful, although that's part of it. We do achieve more in game worlds. But I also mean good as in motivated to do something that matters, inspired to collaborate and to cooperate. And when we're in game worlds, I believe that many of us become the best version of ourselves, the most likely to help at a moment's notice, the most likely to stick with a problem as long as it takes, to get up after failure and try again. And in real life, when we face failure, when we confront obstacles, we often don't feel that way. We feel overcome, we feel overwhelmed, we feel anxious, maybe depressed, frustrated, or cynical. We never have those feelings when we're playing games. They just don't exist in games. So that's what I wanted to study when I was a graduate student. What about games makes it impossible to feel that we can't achieve everything? How can we take those feelings from games and apply them to real world work? So I looked at games like World of Warcraft, which is really...
So it's essentially what she's saying there is, if we can do in games these great problem-solving things, if we can accomplish these large tasks and whatnot, then we should be able to do them in reality. And oh, how engaging games are. And so that was the approach we wanted to take with the social engineering game, and that was some of the game pedagogy we worked into the course. Sorry, go ahead.
And this is the culture of hacking.
Yeah.
Right, this is the culture of hacking, a culture of play, a culture of experimentation, a culture of, this doesn't work, let's see how I can make it a little bit more fun. And this is what our students had to say about this.
Good, because it made it less learning and more game-like, which makes it easier to get into it and learn without actually thinking, oh, I have to study this and learn this technique, do that, because it's game. Games make fun. You learn without trying, in a way. I mean, you were learning actively, but it became not a chore. And actually, it's a technique I've used in almost every class since then, trying to turn things that bore me terribly into a game, so that I can sneak this in through my brain. You know, oh, my brain goes, I don't want to do it. Oh, yes, you do, it's a game. Okay.
That was Marie, one of our students, talking about her experience in the class and how she went on, that clip was a little bit shorter, but she went on to talk about how she was taking, was it a math class?
Accounting.
Accounting class, and she hated her accounting class, and so she made it a game based on what she had learned from our class, that, she found herself very interested in the games we were playing, and she was able to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and working on assignments and whatnot. And so she took this approach and used it in her accounting class in the spring semester. We've talked about problem-based learning, and we did use problem and project-based learning in the class as well. One of the projects that we're going to show you, or problems, is also a bit of game pedagogy that we're going to show you in just a minute as well. And this is where I have to give a tribute to this conference last year. I attended HI-TEC last year and attended Sam's presentation about ethical hacking. And he uses in his course as I think an extra credit assignment, hack this site. And so I had my students go to hack this site and play the basic challenges. There's a few basic challenges. I think there's about 10 of them. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I've never taught this class before. I wasn't sure how much they were able to accomplish. But not only did I have 2 students that completed all of the basic missions, but the day after they completed them in class, they taught the class how to complete the rest of them. So we turned it on its head and actually had them teaching the lesson the following day. And I kind of went to the next slide.
And this was a theme that characterized the entire class. I'm an ethics professor. I don't know anything about computers. So when I was invited to help out with teaching this class, I said, okay, but you realize I don't know things about hacking, right?
To which I said, I don't know anything about ethics either.
And to which the students said, we know things about both.
Right.
And the wonderful thing about this class was that neither one of us were experts. I'm not an expert in ethics. My background is in political theory, very different discipline. Jamie's not an expert in hacking.
No.
Our students, as it turns out, had intermediate levels of proficiency in both. And we found that the more we were vulnerable and the more that we made it possible for them to teach us and for us to teach them, we were able to participate in a much more participatory kind of learning environment, much more collaborative learning environment. So the students literally taught the class. The students literally taught me. I was in the class embedded as a master learner, and I've learned things about how IP addresses work, and now I can set up my own wireless router. But having this space where we said, we don't know, let's find out. Let's Google it. Gosh, I don't know how to figure out the next equation, the next problem on Hack This Site. Let's find out together. I don't know the name of that philosopher that you're thinking about. Let's Google it. Let's think about the answer to this problem together, because as I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, often ethics in ethical hacking is taught in a prescriptivist way. These are the rules, you should follow them, that's the end of the story. I wanted to do something different with this class because I'd never teach a standalone ethics class that way. I wanted to teach a class in moral discernment, which basically is the art of thinking about what's the right thing to do and making decisions based on that. And by making the students partners in this, we could say, we don't know the right answers. We just know what we happen to think is the right thing to do and how to reason about that. And I've got some tips and tricks and tools for reasoning about what the right thing to do is. But fundamentally, this is your problem. You're the one who's got to make the decision about what to do with all of these cool tech tools that you've learned. What do you want to do? So both in ethics and in hacking, we created this environment where learners were teachers and teachers were learners.
Another example of this in the hacking was the textbook. All textbooks, as you know, come with the slides, the PowerPoint slides, right? Neither of us are PowerPoint slide teachers, okay? That's not how we approach things. And particularly in an advanced course like this, we were not going to stand there and say, and such on such and such slide. We weren't going to do that. And interestingly enough, after the first test, which was about 3 chapters long, the students did not so well on the test. And I said to them in class, we said to them in class, what's going on, guys? You're engaged in class, you're here, you're present, why did we not do so well on the test? We think they weren't reading the book is the short answer. But their feedback was, well, you need to be presenting us the PowerPoint slides. You need to be standing up there and lecturing. And I said, no, I don't do that. But if you would like the chapters covered better, you teach them. And so they broke into groups of about 3 students, and they took on the chapters. And they were allowed to present them however they wanted to, but it became their assignment to present them from the chapter. I didn't give them the prescribed slides. They had to come up with their own slides. And the deal I made with them was that if there was not a question or a piece that was addressed from the chapter, they would not get a test question on that. So only what they presented were the test questions based on. So very collaborative type environment.
So they were rewarded both by the extrinsic, here's your grade, but also by the intrinsic, here you are, here's some control.
Yes.
Over what you're going to be evaluated on. Yep.
Did they do better the second time
Good question. Guess what they did better on? The chapter that they covered. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've since employed this in other classes. It is a great technique. And it is consistent that whatever chapter they cover to present, they do better on. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get them to cover all of them? But we can't, really. So,
Yeah.
but good question. Yes.
When I do this in my standalone philosophy class, the student who presented the philosophy of mind section last semester was a complete expert on the philosophy of mind, not so much on anything else,
Yeah.
but did extremely well in that, and had the tools to learn about aesthetics, to learn about epistemology, to learn about all sorts of other things, because he had learned so much about mind.
So, as I briefly mentioned before, was we created a blog for this course using Blogspot. Our intent was to create a location, basically a learning management tool, or a location to sort of dump content for the students to be able to review, to complete assignments, to put assignments in there, to be able to have discussions, things like that. Basically what we do with our traditional learning management stuff, right? However, it turned into something entirely different in this course, which was shocking to us. The students embraced the blog so much that they made it their own. It became much more about the content that they put on there and they ended up driving the content that was on the blog. They would say, I'm having trouble with a problem. They would blog post, I'm having trouble with a problem that we're supposed to be completing. And they would correct the textbook. Oh, it was supposed to be this command, not that command. And they would help each other at 4 a.m. on a blog. It was amazing to us. They essentially took something that we just kind of thought was just going to be a nice repository and turned it into something completely different. Posting videos, links, helping each other, doing all kinds of things we had never anticipated that they would do. And this blog is still there. Interestingly enough, the blog has also been visited by many, many people that were not part of this class across the globe, and has, I don't know exactly what they're doing with it. It is fairly locked down. There's nothing too bad under there. But we also have a student who talks about the blog, right? Video?
We do. And this blog was such a great kind of community space for the students, especially since these were students who were almost all commuter students, almost always had quite complicated lives outside of the classroom, but were able to really become a community on this site. And I just want to say a word about the ethics piece. Originally, the ethics piece was envisioned as a totally web component.
Yep.
And my thought was, oh, I'll post a prompt, I'll post a case of some ethics situation, and then the students will comment and they'll reply, and yeah, that lasted about 2 weeks before the students started posting cases, and the students started posting problems, and they started saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Did you see what
Did
such
you
and such
see
an
what
activist
did you see what Anonymous did this week? Did you see what the Jester's been up to? And they made my job both harder and easier, because then they would begin to harass one another and begin to ask one another to deepen and develop their moral philosophic claims.
There was also, before you go to the video real quick, there was also a bit of gameplay with this as well. They developed pseudonyms that went along with our social engineering game that were Clue style. So if you
General Angry Red.
Right, if you've played Clue, where it's, you know, Scarlet, what is it, Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard. So they chose Clue style names for themselves, so that when they were hacking each other, okay, or you know, getting somebody's address or whatever, it was you know, a little bit anonymous. You didn't know who was doing what. We knew who everybody was, okay? Everybody in the class knew who everybody was, but it allowed them to have a little bit of avatar play, and also kind of protected the innocent a little bit.
Because, for instance, they were doing things like taking pictures of one another's mailboxes.
Right.
So if I'm taking a picture of your mailbox and uploading it to the blog by saying, look, I hacked Comrade Crimson this week, that's a lot more protective of your own privacy than, here's Paula Veluto's mailbox, go hack her, right?
On the blog, everyone took different pseudonyms, because we did have people from different countries, other classes viewing our work, and wanted to maintain a little anonymity. It became a fun place to poke at other classmates, to brag about our assignments, and to post about the work we had done.
And the ideas exchange was really kind of open. It was really conversational and, hey, look what I found. And everyone would go, oh, what did you find? Watch it, discuss it, and see how it related to things we were doing at the time. Anonymous came up a lot as just an interesting reading, because it would start off as an ethics discussion, and then someone would find a link of some interesting tidbit or the latest news of hacker news of this database was broken into, or this protest took over this website, and we started linking those informations to each other on the blog.
Essentially what we're trying to convey to you here in this piece is the level of engagement and learning that went on in this class far exceeded what we expected and what we had laid out for it, because they took ownership of it and they went beyond where we expected it to go. It was shocking, and I would love to replicate it in all my classes. I'm not sure it's possible, but it was amazing.
Now you notice that the title of this course is Ethical Hacking. What I learned in reviewing the textbook that we looked at is that ethical hacking is sometimes defined as white hat hacking, hacking for hire, hacking with permission, hacking because a corporation has hired you to do penetration testing. And that's part of ethical hacking. But I wondered, is that all ethical hacking is? If a doctor is practicing with permission, that's ethical. But if a doctor is saving the life of a patient without permission, that's also ethical activity, right? Legal and ethical are never the same thing. Or they're never coterminous in any event. And we wanted to make sure that we defined ethical hacking in a way that was bigger than just hacking with permission or hacking within the bounds of legality or hacking as a, pardon the expression, corporate hack. So the first day of class, we gave the students the white hat hacker oath, and we said, you have to sign this as a condition of your participation in this class.
The college made us do that, of course.
Yes, the college made us do that. But then we said, well, is this really the right thing to do? Remember that I'm trying to teach the students moral discernment. So day one, here's this oath, sign it, make this promise. Day two, so was that oath legitimate? We asked the students. Is your consent to that oath something that you gave freely, given that we coerced you into doing so by saying that this is a condition of your taking this class for which you have already paid and in which you have already enrolled? We said, is consent enough? The White Hat Hacker Oath provides that hacking with permission is okay, legit hacking. But we said, is consent okay? And can we broaden this? Can we think about sexual consent? Can we think about consent to treatment, to medical treatment? Can we think about, for instance, a case in which a person consented to be killed and eaten by his lover? Does that shed some light on whether permission is the only thing that can make a hack or any act legitimate? In my ethics class, it's built around one central question. What's the right thing to do? And so I asked, what's the right thing to do when you're hacking? And what I wanted to do was get students to figure out how you do it, how you apply this principle of moral discernment. And I wasn't terribly interested in getting the students to say that X is right and Y is wrong. I wanted students instead to be able to defend their rationale for why they had made a particular choice. So we looked at some controversial cases. We looked at some hacktivism. We looked at cases like, well, we looked at a couple of cases that you'll be seeing very shortly. But I wanted to empower the students, just like I do in my regular philosophy class, to participate in a larger discourse on the ethics of hacking.
What we found when we started looking at this piece was that, you know, there's lots of ethical cases out there. There's lots of different, you know, business ethics and medical ethics and all kinds of cases out there. But if there's not a lot in this area that has been written about in a academic kind of way, okay? So what we thought this was an opportunity to do was to ask the students to be those first writers of this, to say to them, go find something that a hacktivist did, tell us why you think it's ethical. Use some of the techniques or some of the things that you learn in this class to do that. And I'm kind of getting into
Yeah.
the next piece, so.
Yeah, and the thing about this is that then the students were solving a real problem in the field, just as they might be using their computer skills to do magic computer things in the field. They're working on virtual machines, as Jaime can tell you more about.
Yep.
But they could also do things with their own machines. They could also work with things like Hack This Site. They could also play with their own networks. And ultimately, after this class, we have every expectation that they'll use these tools in the wider world. We wanted our students to contribute to this larger problem in the field, that there isn't much moral philosophy that deals with the problem of hacking. Basically, the students solved the problem that I had when I was asked, can you teach this ethical hacking course? Where I went and I said, okay, I'm going to look up all kinds of articles and books about ethical hacking. I'm going to look up all of the things that moral philosophers have written about hacking. Oh, wow, there's nothing. But by the end of this class, by the end of the 16 weeks, as you can see on the blog, there is a little bit of something. Because our students were taking specific cases that they found and applying moral philosophies to that. They were applying these ideas about property, these ideas about consent, these ideas about the virtues, these ideas that are older than Christianity, to technologies that are younger than Jamie's 7-year-old child. Happily, this was all going on last fall, and as you might recall, last fall was a politically tinged time. And we were able to use some of the cases from Anonymous. We were able to use some of the things affiliated with the Occupy movement in this class, as we invited students to think about the political nature of activism, because moral philosophy isn't something that exists in a vacuum. Moral philosophy is about democratic debate. It's about the decisions that we make working. It's about the decisions that we make when we're loving. It's about the decisions that we make when we're voting and when we're acting in these structures of power in our larger world. It's about the decisions that we make about what our relationship is to the people and institutions and principles that govern us and that we exist among. And so we empowered our students to think politically about these technological tools. And for the most part, our students hadn't entered the course as terribly politically inclined, terribly engaged in political discourse. And by the end of it, at least 2 students had visited Boston's Occupy camp, and all were a great deal more politically engaged.
Hacker, I guess he or she associates with Anonymous, been part of the Occupy protests, hacked the mayor of St. Louis's website. And all he did was just put up a message saying, you can keep us out of the streets, but you can't stop the message, something along those lines. And he did this because the mayor, after 5 weeks of protesting, the mayor has told them that, you can't protest here anymore, you gotta go, we're shutting you down. And so I guess his moral,
Yeah.
and the moral part of it is that he feels that there is some sort of free speech to be had, and that you can't simply, tell people who feel one way about something, just to stop, because I guess that's not.
And that was Cocoa Puffs that he was eating in class.
That was one of his social engineering assignments. We'll tell you more about the Cocoa Puffs in a minute, but I want to call attention to a couple of things. First, he's taking this thing, Sean is taking something that he observed in the larger world, the hacking of the mayor of St. Louis, Jean Quan's website. He's taking the example of the hacking of this website to put up a message saying you can't stop our message, whatever. He's taking this idea of free speech that we had talked about in the class, about liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of thought. And he's saying, here's this idea and here's how it applies to this thing I saw last week on the news. And this thing I saw last week on the news, it's not just any artifact. It's an artifact dealing specifically with the skills that he is mastering this semester. And he made this application all by himself. He came in and he said, I've got something to talk about this week. Here's what it is. And the Cocoa Puffs, well, One of the things that students were asked to do as part of the game was to smuggle a food item into the room. Cover your ears, Bunker Hill people.
Polish.
Food is not allowed in the computer labs at Bunker Hill. So students were asked to smuggle in the largest food item possible. And I think Sean earned...
Wasn't Sean, Corey.
Corey.
Smuggled in a cake, I think.
Corey smuggled in a cake. That's right. And he earned something like 10 points from his peers for that. So this is an example of the kind of thinking that the students were doing.
This is also Sean.
This is
isn't
the
it?
same student that you heard from, yes. This is one of his blog posts. He says, let's take an example. Take the Sony case, where jailbreaking, modifying a PlayStation, and telling people how to do it might bring on a lawsuit.
In fact, it did, didn't it?
It did. He says, if I rented a car and caused damage to it or modified it against their wishes, the rental car company could bring a lawsuit against me and would be entirely justified in doing so. But if I bought a car and modified it, the car salesman or even the car manufacturer should not sue me. Why? Why? Seriously.
I own it.
Ownership.
You own it. Right, it's yours. But why do you own it?
I bought it, I paid for it.
You bought it, you paid for it, okay. But how was that actually, what did you trade for it?
Money for title.
Money for title. How'd you get the money?
I had to go work.
You had to go work. So you mixed yourself, right? Your work, your ideas, the work of your hands, the work of your body with something else out in this world. And you got something in return. You got money.
Right.
You brought that money and you said, I want to trade this symbol of my work for a car. They gave you the car instead, right?
Yep.
Modified
And
the car.
Now you modified your car, right?
I have 2 of them.
You painted it. You put an air freshener in it. Someone at the last conference that we
Put a door on it
presented.
And,
Sorry?
So he's done this.
larger tires.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Larger tires. This is awesome. But it would be bizarre if, what kind of car do you have?
69 GTO.
It would be bizarre. Yeah, nice car, right? It would be bizarre if they came after you and they said, no, you modified it.
No, but if the manufacturer
If
of
the
the
manufacturer
car sued you
No.
because
sued
you put new
because
tires
you
on
put
it.
new tires on your car? Crazy, right?
Right.
So Sean is saying, why should it be any different? Why should this principle of property, this principle of trading your own work for something, not hold true? He went on to say, there's this guy named John Locke, lived about 300 and change years ago, and he said before, and would claim today, that a civil society was created for the protection of property. That's the point of government, because it's really hard to carry around all our worldly possessions on our backs so that no one else will take them. Property is what is one's own. You acquire property by mixing your labor with something. That adds value. This is a classic thing that philosophers do. You go reason, 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 right? You acquire property by mixing your labor with something. That adds value. If I modify my PlayStation, I am mixing my labor with it. So not only have I mixed my labor with something to trade for the PlayStation, I have mixed my labor with the PlayStation itself. By jailbreaking, I have thought, I have hit some keys, I've done whatever else people do to jailbreak, and I have mixed myself with this PlayStation. Therefore, Sony's definition of property is strictly the opposite of Locke's. It flies in the face of this notion that mixing your labor with something adds value to it, adds selfness, adds ownership to it. So he says, do I own my own PlayStation or does Sony? And yes, you had your hand up?
Well, did the students question the idea that you're not jailbreaking the physical device, you're technically jailbreaking the software, which we actually do lease, we do not own.
That's what they changed in that particular lawsuit.
Yes.
They lost going after the hardware.
That's
right.
Right now, they just copyright all of their software.
Oh,
So they
right.
actually
Yeah.
release the software, it's like when you don't own it.
Right.
Interesting.
So that's where the ethical breach is
Right,
in
it's
the
just like
software
a-
agreement, not in the
And that's what they
hardware
changed.
agreement.
You can jailbreak
Okay.
the iPhone, you can jailbreak any of the
Right.
things, and
I did
it's
not, yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But what happens is if you misuse the phone with the phone service, they have a tendency to get upset with you.
Intellectual
Sam.
property.
Interesting.
There's more than that, there's limits on everything. Everything you only have a limited lease. You can't put a rocket launcher on your car.
Yep.
That's right.
You don't get complete possession, do anything you want, just
That's
because you bought something.
That's right. And all your
Right.
points are valid.
And you don't. But Locke would actually say that you do. And the interesting thing is that this student was taking this philosopher and saying, imagine that John Locke were here today, and imagine that he were called into the courtroom. What would he have to say about this?
Because remember, there's a difference between legal and ethical also. There's that, right. And I don't disagree with what anyone has said. The point of this exercise is I'm not sure that there's a lot of students, well, what we saw was lots of students making these kind of connections, okay? Being able to say, well, isn't this interesting? Even if they didn't get the right answer, so to speak, great for them to be able to tie a philosophy of Locke and have an ethical discussion about a hacking principle, so to speak. So.
And if you're going to act in defiance of the law, better have a good moral philosopher like Locke behind you to do it. You know, this might be legally reprehensible, but they might be able to make the moral argument that it is legitimate. And that's something that we played with a lot in this class. What is legal, what is ethical, and if you're going to do something illegal, or are all illegal things unethical, and are all ethical things legal?
Well, this leads into the next piece.
Yes.
Sort of.
It does.
Oh, well, let's skip that.
And we're going to tell you a little bit more about what we mean by jailbreaking the class in a minute. So now I want you to play the students in this. In 2011, the hacktivist group Anonymous took down Lolita City, a child pornography site, and they doxed the 1,500 users of the site. Jamie, what's doxing?
They published their names and contact information, provided it to law enforcement, and they published it publicly. It's basically doxing.
Was this the right thing to do? Yes.
I think it was wrong, and they also put at least one false name in the list.
Good.
And
I didn't know
they
that.
included the evidence for the cops, and you gotta leave this stuff to police. Just the accusation of pedophilia ruined someone's life. It was completely wrong as far as I understand.
Completely wrong because it can ruin someone's life. So what's your rationalization?
Because you have to leave this to authorized law enforcement officials. You have to do it right to
Okay.
go to court. Just a bunch of amateurs pretending to be Batman or just making the world worse.
So your argument is that it wasn't their role. It's not their job to do this. You've got to leave it to authorized law enforcement.
They didn't do it right.
And they're not qualified,
It's just
and they
like-
didn't do it
it's
right.
like an amateur doing heart surgery, thinking he's saving somebody, but he doesn't even know.
Okay. So no Batman in this world. Yeah. By the way, the dark. Yes. Oh, by all means.
I took a hacking class, so I could hear the class saying to this, yes, it's right for the good of the good, from the literature that I've read.
Yeah.
For the good of the good.
Right.
Interesting.
As individuals, aren't we contributors to the good of the society?
Are we?
That's why I wanted
We are
to
the
know,
society.
did you mean legally or ethically? Was it right? Because they don't always coincide.
Well, right is an ethical justification, right? Right is an ethical category. Legal is the word that we use for whether it's within the law, right?
The law, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. What?
So I
Justice
mean,
you want.
is it ethically defensible? Is it moral? Is it just? Is it right?
I think it's a lot more ethically defensible than it is legally defensible. Yes.
Why?
Because I think a lot of people feel very strongly about that topic for sure.
Child
So
pornography.
Although there are lots of people who would disagree with their actions, there are just as many people who would agree with their actions. So it is a bit of a ethical dilemma.
It is quite an ethical dilemma. What I'm hearing here is a little bit of a majority rule claim, right? That people will disagree, people will agree, more people will agree with their actions, therefore it could be justified?
Which is how we make laws, correct?
Interesting. Interesting. One of the questions about majority is whether if you can get together a majority, will they do the right thing, or will they oppress a smaller minority? It's worth thinking about.
It's presented in this case as an either-or scenario. Is it right or is it
Yeah.
wrong? What about if the group had taken that information and provided it to law enforcement?
They did, I believe, didn't they not?
Yeah, they published.
But without
Yeah.
publishing it.
Without that piece, without the doxing.
So you want to propose not doxing, but just saying to law enforcement, here we are, it's in this list. Would that work, or is that Batman?
Sam still doesn't like that.
I actually, I had a very similar thought. If I parse the second bullet there, was
Yep.
this the right thing to do? This is singular, but the actions were actually plural.
It's fair.
And, yeah, and it was multiple steps, multiple actions.
Yes.
And I think perhaps we need to look at each one individually.
Okay.
Cool.
And perhaps the motives for the first action.
Oh, motives. This is exactly where students went. Motive, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because the motive for the first part is probably defensible, well, if you were to take the majority rule. But the motive for the second seems to be self-promotional.
And the wonderful thing about this is one place where students often go, right? There's a whole school of thought in ethics that asks what matters more, the motive or the action? And there's a guy named Immanuel Kant who thought very deeply about this, and many of you are nodding in this room. And you can probably describe it. So tell me more about Kant. Volunteers, Kant and the motive?
Yeah, if the end justifies the means, in a way.
I think we're
Sort
looking more towards the individual versus the group. So Kant would defend the group and the benefits of the group versus the benefits of the individual. So by presenting this to law enforcement, you're going in the direction of the benefits of the group to basically show this is what's going on, please legally go after these people. Whereas the doxed version is you're going out there for your own benefit to basically say, hey, look what I did. And so that's against what Kant's going for, because he wants to defend society as a whole to be well suited for itself, based upon all of the individuals involved.
And one of the key things that Kant thinks about is using humans as ends or means, right? One of the problems many of the problems that occur in our society result from the fact that we're using other humans as means to something else rather than as ends in themselves. And what you're arguing is, it sounds to me like
the society itself has to be maintained in that form. Whereas one individual with great power, Hitler, anyone, can destroy a society because they can bend to the majority. Whereas if you have the group defends for the group and says, okay, if 5 people are having a problem, let's deal with 5 people. But let's not harm the whole society in the effort to harm those 5.
So now, and now you're raising one of the great debates in moral philosophy, the debate between rights and utilitarianism, the debate between individual rights and collective good.
Good, yeah.
And we spend a ton of time on this very question because I would argue that it is perhaps the most important question, certainly one of the most important questions in all of moral and political philosophy. What's more important, preserving one individual's rights and privacy if just one of these people is wrong? If just one of these people is not actually a user of this site, then they have a right to their privacy, they have a right to their freedom, they have a right to live and flourish and so forth, right? Or do we potentially sacrifice their right to privacy for a larger collective good? And depending on which side of that line you happen to stand on, you'll hang out a little bit more with the rights people, or you'll hang out a little bit more with the collective good utilitarianism people.
Do you want to go back up first?
We can go back up.
And then we'll do the activity?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to let you go first. Good.
What we've given you is a series of examples of how our students changed this class. How our students transformed what our original plans were, whether it was for the blog, whether it was for the game, whether it was for the ethics cases and ethics discussions that we had, whether it was for the very textbook itself and the very assessments themselves. We did, and this happened because we and our students collaboratively created a play space, a hacker space. And in the end, our students ultimately, well, they jailbroke the class. They took what we had offered to them. They took the technology of the class as it was offered to them, and they said, no, 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 no.
You can do better.
If we work together, we can all make this a little bit better. If we open source this class of yours, we'll have a much better learning experience, and you'll have a much better teaching and learning experience.
And obviously that is what happened. Engagement I mean, we retained every single student we started with, which I don't know that I can say that about any other class I've taught in the last, couple of years. Not all of them passed, I will say that, but we retained every student. We had full participation and engagement in ways that we never anticipated. They, as I said, transformed the blog in ways we never anticipated, and they did more work than we ever anticipated they would do. And a lot of it had to do with building this culture. We've talked about some of the pedagogies. They definitely helped. But some of it was us being vulnerable and saying, we're not really sure how to do this. We're not experts in this. Help us. Let's do it together. We didn't really intend to do that. We were sort of honest with them up front that this is the first time we taught the class and things like that. But we didn't really intend to do that. But once we kind of went there, they ran with it. They thought this was great. We had to make sure we didn't cross that line of making it too equal, and I don't think we did. They still, had to do grades, and they still had to listen to what we said and whatnot, but they made it their own. They made it because of the culture of sort of that play. They made it their own, and they were very engaged and very interested in what was going on. It was surprising to us. Yeah?
Did you ever feel a little bit Sony in that? Like you were...
It's very uncomfortable. I mean, when we say we were vulnerable, it was very uncomfortable for us. I liken it to a bit like doing this presentation, which is, I go into a classroom, I think you might say the same thing. A lot of us probably feel this way. We go into a classroom, and if our students don't like us or they don't like what we have to say, tough. We're the boss, so to speak, in some ways. We were still the boss at the end of the day, but it was a little bit more of coming in here and talking to people who know what you're talking about and maybe know some of it better than you do. I would argue Sam knows how to teach ethical hacking better than I do. I've taught it once, So there is a bit of that vulnerability and feeling uncomfortable and having to just be okay with that. But ultimately, we ended up with a much better class at the end of the day. It was very interesting, though.
And when we sat through that discomfort, and when we sat through that, and it's really just fear.
It's fear, right?
It's
Absolutely.
all fear. And when we walked through that fear, and as a teacher I likes to say, as we leaned into the sharp points, the uncomfortable moments, the I don't knows. Yeah. That's when the experience got so much better. That's when we learned more. That's when they learned more. Yeah. And that's when the class just blossomed. It was probably the most uncomfortable day when one of the students came to us and said, I don't like the game.
Yes, the social engineering game.
And so we came to the students and said, what can we do? What do you want to do to fix this? Let's try this. Let's try that. What can you tell us about the game? And after that, once we got to the other side of that, the experience in the game got better, but as it turns out, that rippled through the whole class. Because they had more and more ownership. And there's enough class to go around. It's not like by giving them ownership, we had to sacrifice all of our ownership.
Right.